Well, it's nice to be back with you all again. Yeah, so I'll just get through the announcements very quickly. Um, Big thank you for everyone offering your donations and supporting the Sangha and keeping these broadcasts or supporting these broadcasts. So truly, thank you for that. So I have a lot of questions this week. A lot of questions because I've been gone, and so I thought I would just hop right into them. But before I do, I encourage each of you to see if you can unhook from your thinking mind, unhook from your everyday egoic consciousness, if you haven't already. Because that's what this space of satsang is about. It's a space where we meet in the truth. So we step out of ego and we step into the fullness of our being. And if anyone has any question about how to do that, I want you to imagine listening with the entirety of your body, the fullness of your presence. Can you listen with the fullness of your presence, the fullness of your entire body? And I'll give the example of when you go and get a massage, like get some body work done. You could go there and you could just have all of your awareness, all of your consciousness up in your forehead, and you could just be thinking the whole time. And when you're thinking during a massage, you're not really receiving, so when the therapist is massaging your feet, if you're up in your head, you miss the experience. When they're massaging your hamstrings, you miss the experience of what's there, of the letting go, the tension. Sometimes we feel bliss and euphoria when we receive a massage. If she's working on your shoulders and you're lost thinking about, something that happened earlier in the day, you're not there. You're not there to fully let go, to fully receive the experience. And so I encourage you, see if you can allow your whole body from head to toe to wake up and to listen from this space, to live from this space. This is satsang. This is what it means to be awake. Now you're welcome just to listen with your thinking mind, but then this experience just becomes words and philosophy. But when you listen from the fullness of your being, something truly begins to happen. Truly begins to happen. And we all know this experience. So whether we've, studied yoga, and at the end of the practice, we lay down in shavasana, we allow awareness to be from, the crown all the way down to the bottoms of our feet and beyond. So awareness is open, it's relaxed, it's embodied. It is everywhere, in us and all around us. And this is what it means to be awake. And so it's a good to remind ourselves of this, to step into this, to claim what you are. Because your ego will claim you if you're not careful. It will limit you to simply the fight or flight response. But we don't have to live in such a limited way. When you live in a limited way, you tend to feel depressed or like you're missing something, that I'm not complete, I'm not whole. But as soon as you begin to open your heart and fully come into the fullness of yourself, you begin to have a sense of, I'm divine, I'm holy. What I am is good. What I am is good. Not broken, not less than, not unworthy. But when you come into the fullness of your being, when you awaken out of egoic consciousness, you begin to see, oh, there's something good here. It feels nice to be me. There's a wholeness, a divinity that's here. And so we welcome this first and foremost. And so I have a lot of questions, and I'll jump right into them. But I encourage you, if you have a question, please raise your hand or put it in the chat, and I'd love to connect with you. If you find that you sent me an email and I didn't get to it, please send it again next week. I've been traveling all over, and I am very behind in my emails. And so, here's a question from Sarah. Sarah writes, Craig, after my awakening, I've been working on integrating my humanity more, and I need some encouragement to be able to move forward. I can't find solace in my family or my old friends now. I don't want to live in a big city or work in a mundane job. I want to be out in nature. I feel that I have a path that is different from theirs, and this hurts at times, mostly now, when I need to make a big leap. I don't have any healthy emotional support from anyone except myself now. I need to be dedicated to something or someone or someplace very, very strongly. I need to start giving, sharing myself to people. Otherwise, I will not become healthier. Yeah, this is a great question. It's a common experience on the path. You know, the spiritual path can be quite lonely, can be quite isolating. You know, it can be lonely in the sense if you begin to look at the world and you see the world as almost like a samsaric illusion, and you're starting to wake up. It can feel lonely because you might look around you and you see everyone is, you know, just wanting to hang out at the mall or watch the Super Bowl or chase this thing or chase that thing, or, you know, be lost on Instagram, or, you know, chasing this thing or that thing. And when you begin to wake up, you know, it's like a fish swimming against the stream, against the current. You're stepping out of the normal flow of divinity, and it can be lonely. I will tell you this, that there's a good point to the loneliness. If you give yourself permission to experience the loneliness and get rooted in your strength and your power while you're feeling lonely, then this strength and power will grow, and it will begin to become one of the foundational components of actually having an abiding awakening. Although, if you start to feel loneliness and, you know, you try to reattach to your friends, your old friends, or reattach to old things, or, you know, find something egoic that brings you joy, what you'll find is you'll probably start to feel some level of despair, you know, because you'll find the ego doesn't do it anymore. It doesn't work. It doesn't satisfy me. I can't even trick myself into thinking that the ego is going to satisfy me with a new shiny object or whatever it is that people chase. And so I encourage you, Sarah, to experience the loneliness. And as you're experiencing it, call out to God, call out and go inward more deeply to your heart. So use this loneliness as a time to connect more deeply with God, with the spaciousness of the sky, with your innate clarity, with the depth of your heart. Use this loneliness to drive you forward. You know, Jesus said, once upon a time. Let the dead bury the dead. Pretty brutal teaching, but this is the teaching I'm offering you. Is there's a time to walk away from the old life, but like you're describing, you need something. When you let go of one thing, you need something to attach more deeply to. And so I'm talking about healthy attachment here. So I'm inviting you, Sarah, to become more deeply connected to your heart, more deeply connected with the divine. And if there's a place, that you find supportive, an ashram or a yoga center, or if you go inside and you listen to your heart, and your heart says, I want to start doing healing work in the world, or I want to work at a soup kitchen, I want to share this divinity that I am, then I encourage you to follow that, because the more you begin to share the light, again, I'm not speaking about being a guru, but the more you begin to share the light, the more your heart feels alive, and it begins to come more fully forward into this world. And as you do this, you begin to see that this human world, this samsaric world, is actually a divine world, and that everyone is on the path. And so it's a funny thing that when you first start to wake up, you feel alone and isolated, because you feel as if you're different from your, other brothers and sisters here on planet Earth. But as you start to listen to your heart, fall in love with your heart, and wake up to your gift, whatever that gift may be. It may be to be a leader, to be a teacher, to be a healer. Sometimes our gift is to be a mechanic, and just to be a supportive mechanic to people in this world. Sometimes it's to be a home builder, or a doctor, or a mother or father. And so can you give yourself to whatever your gift is and whatever your profession is? Can you give yourself more fully? And as you do, the loneliness will dissolve. The loneliness will dissolve. So this is a beautiful question, Sarah. So thank you for sharing. I'm glad you brought this up, because the path can be lonely. It can be. The path will stay lonely to the degree that you are not embodied, and to the degree that you ignore life, that you ignore your brothers and sisters here on planet Earth. So you will always feel as if you are a fish out of water, if you've begun to awaken, but then ignore the world. You should feel lonely and depressed and isolated, kind of numb and dead here on planet Earth, if you begin to awaken and you ignore the world, your life, and your gift. But the more you embrace your life, your gift, and your sharing, your brothers and sisters here on planet Earth, what you'll find is your awakening will become more fully into your life, will become more integrated, and you will feel unity. You will experience unity in your experience. So beautiful. Thanks for sharing. Okay. So here's a question. This is from Anna. It's a question about Tantra. Hi, Craig. Having no training in what any of the terms of spiritual practices are, it is not until I've heard you speak about Tantra in your recent talk that you published from your San Diego retreat that I begin to see what happens so often in everyday life. I find that life often paints me into a corner, and it forces me to complete surrender and honesty. This seems to be a natural process that comes forward as ideas and beliefs completely fail, and this illuminates the emotions underneath. I can see how the situation has been split or polarized by my egoic nature. But more and more, I'm finding, that this light comes forward, and rest begins. And I begin to surrender into both the spaces, the divine and the human. almost as a byproduct. And then the actions isn't necessarily based on an outcome. The action then is surrender. Absolutely. This is Tantra. So Tantra is the path of fully embracing our life. Fully embracing our life. Fully opening to our life. And this is true non-duality. True non-duality is tantric. If our non-duality is divisive, if it isolates us, that's called duality. Duality. But true non-duality embraces everything. And as you begin to open to life and see that life is this intelligent force that's always speaking to us, you'll begin to see that life is inviting me to surrender, inviting me to let go, inviting me to empty out, inviting me to face my wound, my shadow, and all of my veils, all of the veils within us. Life is always pointing at you, poking you, whether it's from your wife, your children, your husband, your boss, the next door neighbor, the barking dog, the empty bank account. This is life speaking to us, telling us, hey, wake up, there's something here you must see. If your bank account is always empty, unless you're, born, in absolute poverty, there's probably something that you're missing here. God's trying to teach you, to show you, to get some ground under your feet, to honor this world, to find another way to live, where you're connected with abundance, with joy, with support. And so good. Here's a question. Craig, what if there is fear around your gift? This is a great question, Lynn. There's almost always fear around our gift. Almost always. It's a very interesting thing that God gives us an incredible gift, a divine gift. But then God also gives us a veil on top of that gift. So your gift may be, I want to share the Dharma, I want to share the truth. But then there's a fear of being seen, a fear of being attacked, a fear of being not qualified, a fear of people making fun of you, a fear of being rejected. And so we must not give in to fear. One of the things I realized quite young was God is the boss, and it's my job to be a good worker. So if God has given me a gift, God has given me a tool, there's an expectation to use it wisely, humbly, honestly, courageously. But most of us have these incredible gifts within us. It's a gift to be a leader, a healer, a supporter, a good friend. Most of us ignore our gifts because of fear. We're afraid, oh, I can't really say that. What will they think? People will laugh. Whatever it is. And I encourage you to break through those chains of fear and just begin to sharing, like that bumper sticker says, the small random acts of kindness. Can you begin to share small random acts of your gift here on planet Earth? Can you share these small random acts and begin to see that the world is thirsty for your heart? Thirsty for your heart. The world doesn't need another closet Buddha or a closet Christ. The world needs expressive Christ, expressive Buddhas. Those who are willing to sit and hold the hand of someone who's suffering. We have lots of doctors here on planet Earth, and someone came up with this wonderful idea of this organization called Doctors Without Borders. I have a good friend of mine, and he's an ER doctor. He makes lots and lots of money. He makes so much money he barely works. And so he says, okay, in my free time I study the Dharma, but also in my free time I'm going to volunteer at least once a year and do a couple weeks or a month, in Nepal or in India. And so he'll be a traveling doctor, and he shares his heart, and he just offers his services for free. This is his heart coming forward. This is his Buddha nature coming forward. But imagine if he stayed at home and said, oh, I don't know if those people really need me. They don't, who am I? I can't go there. I don't speak the language. They won't receive me. They'll just think I'm another white man, trying to be a do-gooder or try to be a missionary. So I'll just stay at home. Like, the world doesn't need us to stay at home. The world doesn't need us to be less than. The world needs us to be greater than. And this is what the desire to spiritually awaken is all about. It's the desire to be greater than ordinary. Greater than. But most people think of spiritual awakening as a gift that I get. I get to have peace, I get to have love, I get to have strength, I get to have freedom, and it's mine. And I'm going to sit here in my own little world. And you're not going to progress far on the path unless you know how to work. So I like to look at spiritual awakening the same, the same way I look at an order from a boss. Like, a boss says, hey, do this. Spiritual awakening is basically God saying, I want you to pick up a cross and carry this cross because your other brothers and sisters cannot. They're not strong enough. I want you to carry the cross. I want you to share your heart. I want you to share your light. I want you to share your love. I want you to give of yourself fully. God is not saying, I want to shower you with grace so you can live in your own private, selfish heaven world. That is not what spiritual awakening is about. It's about you being showered with grace so that your cup overfloweth and blesses your brothers and sisters. And keep in mind, your brothers and sisters are simply a manifestation of your own self, of all the places within you that you've ignored, that you've denied, that you've forgotten, that you've forsaken. And so when you serve them, you serve yourself. It's a beautiful thing to serve. It feels wonderful to serve. And you will always feel empty. Even if you are radically spiritually awake, you will always feel empty unless you are sharing your heart and sharing your gift. Because your heart will ache. It'll say, I'm missing something. There's something I'm missing here. There's something I'm missing. I'm not fully including the expressive nature of God. I can also say this, that oftentimes we may get to a place of spiritual awakening where we plateau and we will stay stuck there until we begin to share, until we begin to open our heart, until we begin to become deeply honest about this beauty that is within us and that this beauty wants to come forward. It's a very common thing on the path, is we may have a nice realization, normally of peace and emptiness and some level of freedom. But in order for us to progress into a greater level of freedom, a greater level of unity consciousness, which includes the heart, a greater level of unconditional love, we have to step into our gift and begin sharing. It's a perfect science that God has designed so that we don't just become old. I like to use sometimes I make fun of Buddhist, but old crusty Buddhist. I've hung out with a lot of old crusty Buddhists and who've begun to realize something great, but they save it all for themselves. Okay, so this is a good question here. Let's see here. I better move along because there's so many questions. Here's a question. Hi, Craig. This body-mind is becoming more and more of a lighthouse, yet it has spent decades as a kind of a haunted house. Yes. Yes, I know this experience. So this body-mind is becoming more of a lighthouse, but for many years it's been a haunted house. As the light comes in and the old ghost of repressed pain, trauma, shame, and fear are stirring from the dark and coming to the light to be liberated. Beautiful. It is intense. It is intense. Good. That means you're doing good work. So if your path is lit up and there's lots of old karma and things being emptied out of you, that means you are doing good work. You're doing good work. And here's the question. Craig, do you still have old karma coming unhooked from within the body-mind, or has all that process passed? Oh, if you hang out with me, you will realize I am a perfected being, a completely enlightened soul. I'm sorry. No, of course I'm full of karma. Of course there's all kinds of old things that are being released, from my consciousness, throughout my life. There's a mythological belief that when we get to some level of enlightenment, that all of our karma has dissolved. And I will be, the first this evening to make this crystal clear. As long as you have a human body, you have the entire karma of the species within you. The entire karma. So the idea of being a perfected soul where you get to a place where, you're all the way done, this absolutely does not exist. It does not exist. We live in an evolutionary world. In an evolutionary world, the whole species is within you. Everything of the species. And so, I'll bring in the worst things. Genocide, war, violence, assault, aggression, greed, lust, anger, rage, addiction, jealousy, shame, guilt, all that kind of stuff. Everything is within the human body, all the way down to the fight or flight response. All the way down to the fight or flight response. Fight or flight response is literally in every cell of our being. And it's through listening to that movement, that program, that karma is created. And so karma is through in and throughout. A different word for karma is inertia. And so we can have inertia. That's just like, an object moving with momentum in one direction. Like if you take an object and just threw it in space, and let's imagine you just threw, a ball of depression in space. That depression is going to just continue to flow on forever until it's acted upon by an outside force. So the outside force that we are inviting is the force of awakening, the force of this energy of something greater. And so we're inviting something greater to come into us and transform us from the inside out. And I will tell you this, there is nothing within this body that I cannot find. The most hellish things and the most beautiful and wondrous things, I can find it within me because I am one with life, as are you, as is everything. We are one with life. And so I make it a priority to be honest about karma, to be honest about what it means to live in a human form, and to meet whatever's arising with love. I'm not trying to dig it up on a daily basis, but what I am is I am very open, because when you're open, you don't have to dig much. If there's something here that needs to be seen, it begins to come forward into your consciousness. And I start my day with a prayer, something as simple as, Lord, you show me the way. You give me the strength to work with what arises. Will you heal me? Will you hold me? Will you liberate me more fully so that I can be a clear conduit of your light, of your grace, of your love? One of the things that does begin to happen with spiritual awakening is your karma, it begins to feel less and less personal. And it just feels like, like there's stuff here, stuff of the species, so I don't take it personally. If I find something or something arises that's quite ugly, I look at it and say, oh, here is something that needs to be loved. Here is something that needs to be loved. And so I breathe into it. I relax the body. And to help it, support it in unhooking to the best of my ability. And if I find that there's something within me that's really stuck, and my humble act of surrender and my humble act of love doesn't fully heal it and release it, then I call out the big guns. I call upon God. I call upon the Divine Mother. Come into me. Hold me. Heal me. Liberate me. Show me the way. Show me the way. And so, if you're ever with a teacher who says they are a perfected being, I encourage you to keep an eye on that door. They may have a good thing or two to say, but you should know your exit plan, your exit strategy. Here's a question that I could kind of piggyback on that. Let me see here. Because someone asked me a question about this. Craig, what is the process of healing when one individuates from a teacher / a community? Yeah, this is really good. So when you're with a teacher, at some point, you should, in a healthy way, outgrow that teacher. And so they may be an incredible teacher, and like me, for example, I had an incredible teacher. I spent 2 decades with him. And, at some point I realized it was time for me, to start moving on, And I will say this, one of the things I began to notice is that I began to lose my patience, ironically, with my teacher who was so good with me for so many years. I lost my patience because I felt like I had gotten everything I needed to receive. I received everything I needed to. I mean, he spent 2 decades training me. I had a very intimate relationship with him, very close. I've said this often, but I probably have spent more time with my teacher, David, than any other human on planet Earth. So I spent so much time with him. And at some point, I realized and he realized it was time for me to move forward, to move on. He was encouraging me, to begin teaching, sharing. Hell, I mean, he trained me for so long. There was an expectation of that. But, there's we all feel this when we're 18 And if you continue to live with your parents after the age of 18, you start to feel a little bit angry, a little bit agitated, a little bit irritable. You begin to feel, angry. The anger is your true self wanting to individuate. And so if you don't listen to the voice of your heart, the voice of your heart, which is telling you, hey, it's time to go now. We've received what we needed to receive, but now it's time to go. If you don't listen to the voice of your heart, you start to get a little angry or grumpy. You start showing up to class late, the same way you do in high school. It's like, okay, I'm tired of raising my hand to go to the potty. In high school, so you start skipping class, and you put your energy elsewhere. And so in a healthy way, developmentally, it's appropriate. So if you are with a good teacher, like I had, it's time to individuate when you feel as if you've gotten everything you needed to receive. You rode the course to the end. You completed everything you needed to complete. And you might start to get a little angry or grumpy or sleepy, or your heart will just tell you, hey, it's time to move on. Now, I will say this. Don't let your egoic consciousness trick you into leaving too soon. That's a common thing on the path, especially with good teachers. Sometimes our ego comes forward right about at the 1 year mark, the 3 year mark, the 8 year mark. I've heard other teachers speak about this. And so there's something to be said about sticking around for a long time and being committed to one tradition. But what you'll find is individuation can take place in different ways. Maybe it means we don't show up to, all the teachings in every way. We start sharing more within the lineage, within the community. Or we just, visit, the teacher a couple times a year, go on retreat a couple times a year. I still look to my teacher, David, but I feel his voice speaking within me. And so I just generally look in his direction if I feel a little confusion. But then immediately I feel his voice moving through my consciousness. And I know I don't really need to go bother him. And he, he's busy serving others. And so that's if the teacher is good. I'll do the quick one too. If the teacher is not so good, if you're with a teacher who is abusive, if a teacher is unethical, then I encourage you to take what's good and then pack your bags and move on. And so at any stage in the journey, especially in guru paths, sometimes in the guru paths, there's a lot of people who are stuck in the dynamic of being like a child. And children are smart, children are honest, children are wise. If a children is around someone who's stealing or who's acting unethical, the heart of the child says, this isn't right. And so I encourage you to listen to that heart. And so, if you're with a guru or a teacher who's being unethical, or, they're shady, or they're getting involved in monkey business, even if you have a child-like relationship with them, like the guru is always right and we're always bowing and this and that. If your heart is telling you and your discernment is telling you something stinks here, now is the time to individuate. You should listen to your heart first and foremost before you listen to the guru's heart, especially if the guru is getting involved in monkey business, which has happened commonly, unfortunately. And so if it's something little, we forgive the guru, but if it's something serious, we don't forgive, we move on. Like if every now and then, if your guru has an emotional moment, no big deal. Your teacher has an emotional moment, they're human. Part of individuating is realizing that we're all human, this is an evolutionary world. We're all works in progress. But there's some things that are non-negotiables. You know, when someone crosses a line, if a teacher is violent, if they're abusive, if they're doing strange things with their cities, you know, I've heard all kinds of stories about people being psychically attacked by their teacher. And it's just like, then things are getting weird. If the teacher's being manipulative, please leave. Please leave. You know, it's time to be done with those games. And so, and the same is true with the community. Sometimes the teacher can be great, but the community can be highly manipulative. They can get into a weird group think, you know, strange group dynamics. There can be all kinds of jockeying for control of power to be the successor and all this and that. Things can get very, very strange. I've visited many teachers, many groups, and I was always amazed at how each group had its own group think. And sometimes the group think was highly unhealthy. And if you are in an unhealthy spiritual community, it's very similar to being in a toxic family. It's hard to grow when you're in a toxic family. And so it's important, if you see something that's a non-negotiable, you know, that's unethical, that's wrong, that the teacher or the community crosses a line, you know, that you speak up, you try to, you know, see if the community can correct it, the community can heal. But sometimes, just like in a family, you speak up and say, hey, mom or dad, I think what you did wasn't psychologically appropriate, it's kind of narcissistic or whatever. And if the community is unable to hear you, if it's a toxic community, then yeah, it's time to leave. And while you leave, part of the individuation process is you having faith and trust in God that she will bring you another teacher, another community. So a lot of people get stuck in spiritual communities because they think this is my one and only chance. A lot of teachers sell that to us. This is our one and only chance to wake up. But I encourage you to look at that. It's true that there is something special, probably, you know, if there's a lot of grace and light, that there's something special here. But it doesn't mean it's the one and only chance. You know, if you found something special, there's a great likelihood that something even greater can come, especially if, you know, the path you're on is, you know, it's with a teacher who's toxic or whatever. So I hope that was helpful. And let's see here. I could probably go on and on about that. But you know, I'll probably just end there. The big thing is to listen to your heart. Your heart will know when it's time to be done. Not your egoic heart, not doubt, because the grass is always greener somewhere else. So just keep that in mind. But part of the path is a big part of the path is developing discernment. Discernment, you know, tells us when something stinks here, when something's off, when there's something manipulative going on, hey, it's time for me to be done with this. You know, if you have discernment with an open heart, you'll go forward with trust and faith that God can bring you something even greater. I've been blessed to have amazing teachers here on planet Earth. And I've also been greatly shocked at the stories I've heard of people who've had less than amazing teachers. I've heard some horrific stories, you know, of what's been done in spiritual communities and in, you know, spiritual teachers, you know, in their relationships with students. And so please trust your gut. If something's not right, leave and individuate and trust that that was just a stepping stone. Oftentimes we get involved in trauma with communities and teachers when we have a wound of unworthiness. Not always, but it's common. And so if there's that wound there, in order to heal unworthiness, we have to be willing to go our own way with an open heart, trusting something greater will come, while simultaneously loving ourselves. And that means giving ourselves permission to be angry, to grieve what happened, and to surrender that pain, and to go forward with an open-heartedness and trust. So I hope that was helpful. Okay, so here's another question. I'm looking at the time. I'm not sure I'll get all these done, but okay. This is from Taylor. Craig, can you speak about how to invite my divinity out more fully as me so that my humanity can fully surrender to it? Yeah, so, the big thing about connecting to your divinity in an embodied way, to make it very simple, can you be kind to yourself? Can you love yourself? Can you be gentle to yourself? Can you listen to yourself? And as you do so, your divinity comes forward. And then we play that same game with life. So with your wife, your kids, your dog, the neighbor, when they speak, can you hear them fully? When they walk in the room, can you see them fully? Can you see their divinity? Can you literally see the radiance pouring out of their eyes? Radiance pouring off, out of their skin. Can you see that? This is a great first step here on planet Earth. Can we see that everyone and everything is God? Literally. My teacher gave me this as an inquiry, as a mantra, as a practice, as a contemplation. He lived in New York City for a while with his teacher, Hilda Charlton. And she told him, David, when you walk down the street, see everyone that comes at you as God, as the divine. And say, this too is God, this too is God, this too is God. And he began to play this game as he was walking down whatever street he was on, 42nd Street, as he was walking through Central Park. This too is God, this too is God, this too is God, this too is God. And as he played this game, his heart became greater and greater and greater and greater and more expansive. And when you start with this practice of this too is God, whoever I'm looking at, they are God. When you start with this as your practice, it very much helps your gift to come forward, whatever the gift it is. Your gift to share, your gift to love, your gift to help, your gift to be a service, your gift to sing, your gift to, to listen. When you see that this too is God, everyone and everything, your heart explodes open. It's very helpful too, because for many of us on the spiritual path, back to that loneliness, the spiritual path can be very isolating and can get very narcissistic. I've met too many people who all they are doing all day long, they're just continually processing their own pain, their own emotions, their own karma, which is good. I mean, because most of us don't stop and do that here on planet Earth. And so it's a stage for us to become narcissistic. And by that, I mean just inwardly directed and processing. But after a while, it's important that we begin to open that door to everyone and everything, so that our path doesn't just become about me, my pain, my letting go, my surrender, my spiritual awakening, because boy, doesn't that sound narcissistic, and boy, doesn't that sound egocentric. We want this path to be God's path, where we're seeing God everywhere in everything. That's the point, is to see God everywhere in everything. When you begin to see God as everywhere in everything, you naturally share, you naturally are kind, you're naturally compassionate, you naturally love. It's funny because there's individuals who I see, when I look at them, I literally fall in love. I just fall in love with their beauty, their divinity, their strength, their humility, their tenderness. I'm inviting you to do the same. to do the same. As you fall in love with life, something magical happens. But I will say this, because this is an important step, as when you go from being on the path and processing so much emotional pain or guilt or whatever, and you feel overwhelmed with that, just healing yourself in the transformative process, when you begin to start to open your heart to the rest of the world, one of the qualities you must begin to evoke is strength. Because I've seen this more often than not, that people, they go inward and they spend a lot of time processing, and they just are always crying and letting go and surrendering, and they kind of just feel ripped wide open and feel really raw and tender and vulnerable. But in order to open your heart and to be able to see God everywhere and to feel what the world feels, you have to get in touch with your belly, your power center, your Buddha nature. Come into this strength. And from this strength, you love. You love. That way you're not melting and falling apart, or just overwhelmed, or like one of these hypersensitive spiritual individuals. I once was a hypersensitive spiritual individual, so I know that path. Okay, so beautiful question. All right, let's see here. A lot more questions here. Let's see if I can move forward. Okay, this one's from, probably going to butcher this name, but it's from Pavel, I believe. Pavel writes, "Hi Craig, in September I had a kundalini awakening. Kundalini awakening gone wrong is what they write. And I went into full-blown psychosis. I believe my crown chakra opened up in the wrong way, began attracting unwanted manifestations. I also have a buzzing noise that sounds like a frequency coming in from the top of my head. I need to get rid of it." You know how I can make things come back to normal? Yeah. Pavel, I encourage you to get some support. Meet with a qualified teacher who can help you. You need to do some one-on-one work. And so sometimes on this spiritual path, we open to something overwhelming. And we look to YouTube for support. We look to blogs for support. We send people like me emails for support. And, I'm not going to have a quick answer for you. I'm going to give you a couple things to do, but you need some one-on-one support. And I cannot overemphasize enough how helpful it was for me to spend 20 years with a teacher who at any moment on any given day, I could call and ask my question, or I could drive to his house, or I was with him and just ask him the question. I can't tell you how helpful that was to have ongoing support. If you have big experiences, you need to have a good teacher, a good support. A teacher, a healer, a somatic therapist, body worker, this type of thing. So the first thing I'm going to tell you, my friend, is take off your shoes and walk around in the grass. Get yourself grounded. See if you can bring awareness to the bottoms of your feet, to your pelvis, to your belly. Get grounded. Depending on where you are on planet Earth, go out, work in the garden, focus on Mother Earth, the energies of Mother Earth. If you're in snow, shovel snow. Get completely grounded and as practical as possible. That will help you get back into your body. That will help bring things back to normal. But normally, if we've gone into, full-blown psychosis and we're having huge amounts of energy, then that chakra isn't going to close. What we need to do is to balance it with some of the lower chakras and feeling your feet on the ground. If you have psychosis, I encourage you, don't believe your thoughts. It may be appropriate to meet with a psychiatrist. Some psychiatrists, if they're holistic, could be quite helpful. Some could be quite unhelpful, so it's always a gamble. But if you're having ongoing psychosis, sometimes it's helpful to meet with a psychiatrist. I always encourage you to try first a good spiritual teacher, a good counselor, a good therapist, a somatic therapist first, and get grounded for a while. And then if none of those things are helpful, after a number of sessions, try psychiatry to help kind of dampen the energies and stop the psychosis. So if the psychosis was just temporary, that's common sometimes on the path. The basic teaching is don't believe your thoughts, get into your belly, get grounded. The buzzing sound, I want you to imagine, is the sound of a high-pitched om. Like I opened once in my crown chakra and a buzzing sound came forward. And that must have been, 12 years ago. I still have a buzzing sound in my head. I can hear it right now. But when I looked at it directly, I see it's a high-pitched om. It's a frequency of light shining in my consciousness. I see that as a beautiful thing. When I first experienced it, I saw it as something uncomfortable because I did not understand it. My teacher helped point me in a direction where I could see that it was something wonderful. Okay. Here's another question about kundalini. See if I can wrap these up. Hi, Craig. I was watching your YouTube video and have all signs of kundalini. I'm experiencing extreme exhaustion and waking up very tired. I was just wondering, is this what you had experienced? From Melissa. Yeah, Melissa, so with my kundalini awakening, I had about 5 years of intense active symptoms. Before that, I had about 8 years of intense active, just pure pain. But so yeah, I absolutely, exhaustion is something that comes forward on the path. I'm going to tell you the same thing I told the person before you. If you're having extreme anything, get in touch with a good teacher, a somatic therapist, a healer, some guides, because we don't want to live with exhaustion. Sometimes exhaustion means there's something within us we're resisting, we're ignoring, we're fighting with. Sometimes it just means we've awoken and there's a lot of energy flowing through our nervous system, and we just feel fried. Eventually, the idea is to get comfortable with this flow of energy so that your karma, your body, your psychological nature is not fighting with it. Normally, when our ego fights with the energies of awakening, we become exhausted. Or if we're ignoring something, we become exhausted. So I encourage you to look where you don't want to look, see if there's something ignoring that needs to be faced, and play with that, and also get some support. Okay, one last question, and then I'll be done here. I'll be quick here. It's from Arjo. Hi, Craig. I've had some negative thoughts come back to me lately because I guess I've slipped into an egoic self-unknowing, although I feel irritated by it, but it is not as scary as the time when I did go through my awakening in the dark night. I drift in and out of the dilemma about how to treat the thoughts agitating my mind and the self even more. I know I just have to let them be, but sometimes I get sucked into. Yeah, so two things. Whenever we have something that keeps coming forward, from one perspective, we want to give it full freedom, just to let it be as it is, let it come forward, and let it release. So the more relaxed you can be with your thoughts, especially negative thoughts, that's a good thing. That will help them to spontaneously release. But if we're having similar habitual negative thoughts coming forward again and again, I encourage you, Arjo, to do some inquiry, to look at the root of these negative thoughts. Why did this same flavor of negativity come forward? Was this negativity passed down to me from my father? Is there a fear? Is there a pain at the root of this? And can I meet this with love? Can I meet these negative thoughts with love. If there's anything habitual arising within our consciousness, it needs to be met with love. We cannot simply just let it be as it is. Healing doesn't happen just through letting things be as it is. Healing happens through love and through embrace and letting things be as they are. And so I hope that makes sense. I feel like I did my part here getting through those questions. Thank you for patiently sitting with me. If I missed your questions, please email me again. It's been an absolute pleasure being here with you all. And so much love to you. I'm going to have a very consistent schedule from now on. And so I look forward to seeing you again soon. May peace be with you all. And truly thank you all for the donations, the support. Have a wonderful night. Yeah, bye for now.